Okay, welcome to Stress Month. I'm chatting with Jane McPhillips. And you just want to quickly tell us what you do, and then we will talk about stress.
Great, yeah, thank you for having me on. So I am a solution-focused hypnotherapist, and I specialise working with women going through all stages of the menopause. And so I'm very keenly interested in how women are experiencing stress during the menopause, and very acutely aware of how this can be a real issue.
Absolutely. And I don't think we find many women in their 40s and 50s who aren't stressed, do we?
Absolutely. And I think there's so many reasons for that. I think, we've managed stress to a certain degree, 20s, 30s, moving into our 40s even. But I think there comes a point of a combination of accumulation of that stress, trying to spin all those plates, as well as our hormones depleting. So we don't have as much about us in our bodies in order to be able to manage that stress. We have our hormones fighting between, is it going to be cortisol that's going to be made for the stress, or is it going to be progesterone that's going to help us to manage our stress? And this fight happens, and quite often the cortisol and the stress wins, because we come to a point where there's just so many hats, I think, that we wear as women in caring roles in particular. And I think there comes a point then when there isn't so much for us to be able to manage that stress, that it all becomes quite overwhelming. And absolutely, I suppose one thing is just trying to normalise that is happening to us all to some degree during perimenopause. And it's how we manage that in order to then be able to continue, and the stress to not become so very chronic, which is one of the worries.
Absolutely. And I think as you touched on, we deal with it differently now to how we did in our 20s and 30s. And I quite often sort of see posts from women who almost feel like they're failing because lesser things are tipping them over the edge. But actually, the stress has been building up, and it doesn't need to be something huge. I mean, I suppose it's why we have the saying, crying over spilt milk, isn't it?
Absolutely. It comes as, so I often use the analogy of a stress bucket, that we carry around a certain level of stuff from our younger years that we've had to manage and deal with, and maybe not really have time to process because we just kind of get on with life. We carry that stuff around with us, and then we build and put on top even more and more and more as we get older, because I think naturally those worries become more difficult to manage. They mean more as we get older. So it comes to that accumulative effect then, where you have a stress bucket that's almost overflowing with stress that can create not only stress but anxiety, with them being closely linked. And it can be that little thing that is, that kind of straw that breaks the camel's back, as it were. It doesn't mean to say that you can't and we can't cope with those little things. It's just that the accumulation has come to the point where it just takes those little things and can't cope anymore. And I think that fight-flight response that maybe we were able to manage a little bit more when we were younger, maybe we even enjoyed being a little bit on that edge of kind of adrenaline running the show. Now it's like, well, adrenaline is stealing the progesterone that helps us to feel calm and helps us to manage our mood and to sleep better. If we're not sleeping well, we're going to feel more stressed. If we're naturally going to be put in that fight-flight response more often, then again, we're running on cortisol and adrenaline. That doesn't feel pleasant. So it doesn't feel like we're going to cope with the fact that I've just had a parking ticket, or, I can't get into Tesco because, there's no. It can be that little thing that means I can't cope. And I agree with you. I've read a lot of posts about women feeling that they're failing in that respect, when actually we've been dealing with a huge amount for so very many years. But this is the time of life to start to attune to. So how do I start to manage some of those things in a way that means I not keep moving into that fight-flight response so often?
Yeah, and so in the hypnotherapy that you use, how can you help people to manage their stress with that?
So it's a combination of things. So with the hypnotherapy that I do, it's talking therapy first, which is using cognitive behavioural therapy and solution focused therapy, and also some creative action methods that helps us to look at the different parts of ourselves that show up and really help to work on the goals that people are struggling with. And then the hypnosis allows for that total relaxation time, for the mind to be quietened, so that we can listen to the more coping positive statements that then as a hypnotherapist I can give to the subconscious. And then you go away feeling recharged in the, okay, I'm moving towards my goal. I'm feeling like things are a little more possible, because it feels like an enormous tangled web, I think, when we're going through the menopause. It's like it all just feels connected together, and you can't see the wood for the trees. You can't see how anything is possible, because your body feels like it's giving up on you. Your brain just feels like it's a scrambled mess. And, you know, everybody around you, you believe and perceive them to think that you're crazy. So how do you find your way through it? And I think
we always perceive that everyone else is doing all right, don't we? Oh, they're all adulting really well. And I feel like, I mean, just to add in a little Christmassy sort of note, given that we're, you know, in the run up to Christmas, like when you get the lights out of the loft and you're like, right, well, this is just a jumbled mess and I don't even know where the ends are. I think each of us is feeling like that, but we all think that everybody else is looking at this amazing of lights that are all perfectly strung out.
Yes, and I think the wonderful thing about the Facebook group that you've created is that it's absolutely evident that not every woman is experiencing that, and I think it really helps to normalise that in the first instance, and then for women to find the right complementary therapy that suits them, that you know resonates the most, to just start to help untangle that. And that's what I do. And when women come to me, is just to let's start untangling that, just a little piece by piece. And it can take it is really, and I see this being the smallest change is the most significant. Not even as much as a change, but more as a transition, because change can be, oh, I'm just moving from one thing to the other. Moving into the menopause and through the menopause is a transition. I think it's really important for us to see it as that, because we are looking behind at the things that maybe are changing, that we can no longer do in the same way, for us to then go, okay, how do I look forward to the future to manage my stress, maybe in a different way? Because whereas in my 20s and 30s, you know, I remember I could drink a coffee, I could stay up till 3 a.m, I could be at a nightclub and go to work at 9 the next day. There's absolutely no way in hell will I be able to do that at nearly 46. I have to think about how I use my energy really carefully, and therefore also how we manage stress. So I think to be able to, a starter, to just go, oh, this is the mess of my brain. Can I have somebody to just help me to unpick this and put it back together in a way that makes sense, so that stress doesn't just keep knocking me sideways? Because that's what I'm hearing and seeing for a lot of women, is that it's flooring a lot of women. I think you also see and read the really terrible figures of how often women feel that they can't be at work with that stress, and they can't vocalize that it's to do with, actually I think perimenopause might be at play here as well. So I think there's a lot of women who are suffering in silence, alone, thinking, I can't do this. And I think brain fog is also a stressor. You know, brain fog is huge, is real. You know, our brains use glucose differently at this time of life. So there's reasons why brain fog happens, and that can make us feel like we're not so competent at our job, or not so competent at really anything in life when brain fog hits. And I think that can be another stressor as well, because again, we're kind of almost that shame of going, oh, I can't really remember things in the same way, or brain's just not firing in the same way. More reasons to think, I'm a lesser woman at this
point. And actually, the worst thing for brain fog is stress.
Exactly. It's that vicious cycle, isn't it? But yes, you then start to become stressy and panicky about the things that you can no longer do, and you go round and round. So for me, I think it's about finding those small steps towards what's going to help me to feel get back to how I can feel like me again. And I think for us to get back to feeling like me again, coming back to that point about transition, is that it's finding who we are as we're getting older. We're not the same woman that we were in our 20s and 30s. So who am I now, and what am I made up of, and what are my strengths? What are the strengths that have got me to this point, that are going to help me to get me through the next 20, 30 years and be a strong woman that I can feel empowered at the same time. So I think taking those small steps to be able to calm the mind, and I think that's quite challenging for a lot of women, because I think there's this this kind of belief that we can have it all. I think as women, we've come from that time of, well, we couldn't go to work and raise the kids and do the other things. However, now it's almost like, oh, but we can do all of these things and be amazing in the kitchen, and I don't know, have all these hobbies and say, all these things that we can do. And I think it's difficult to actually go, oh no, I need to put some of these things down now. Yeah. I can't try and achieve all of these things. Slowing down a little bit and going, okay, how can I manage life a little bit slower and become more attuned to what my body needs, how I can manage my emotions? Because going at everything at 100 miles an hour, that stress cycle means that it's very difficult to listen to what our body needs. But I know that can be challenging to stop. Yeah. I think it's being in that fight, flight, stress response can become familiar, and so it can be difficult to slow down because that doesn't feel familiar. Yeah. So I do very much help clients to start slowly to unwind bit by bit, rather than just going, oh, people say, oh, you just need to meditate. Yeah, but if you're really stressed, it's the last thing you're going to sitting quietly with your thoughts is not always useful for everyone. Some people absolutely can fit into that. For some people that feels like an enormous jump. Yeah. So hypnosis is quite helpful, because as well as talking about things, it can then be, okay, you just sit and listen to what I've got to say, and you don't even need to listen. You just switch off for a bit. And it's a nice step towards quietening the mind, allowing the body to start to unwind. I noticed that, because I help women to notice where they're holding tension, for example. So a lot of women, when they're stressed, we find that we hold a lot of tension in our jaw area. Mm-hmm. In our neck, in our shoulders. So without realizing it, we can be a bit like this, tight here, tight here. It's like, but yeah, let's get you laid down and just start to notice how you can allow that to release slowly. And what clients do notice is, as the body starts to relax, the mind starts to quieten too. And then you can start to work with, okay, this feels not too scary. Let me find other spaces in my day where I can just allow things to be a bit quieter. Then you can start to get that control, and then start to find positive ways of dealing with that stress. So it's almost like an unwinding process from that tight spring, as it were, of stress, to let's unwind it very slowly and look at ways that you feel comfortable with having space to relax and feel quieter.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jane.
Okay, you're welcome.